2. The promises of judgment. Obadiah 5-9. If thieves came to thee, if robbers by night, how art thou cut off? Would they not have stolen till they had enough? If the grape-gatherers came to thee, would they not leave some grapes? How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. Shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding out of the mount of Esau? And thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed, to the end that every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. When the communist dictator Nikita Khrushchev declared to the United States, "We will bury you," millions of conservatives were deeply perturbed and demanded more anti-communist action and defense preparations. More plainly, and with a perfect record of performance lacking in Khrushchev, the triune God has declared in Scripture to all who forsake him that, in effect, he too will bury them, and his judgments are absolute. It is a telling commentary on these same Americans that, while they fear the communist threat, they do not fear God's threat in the slightest. The communist menace is a real one, but it is nothing compared to the judgment of an angry God. The reason for this differing relationship of these Americans to communism and to God is very apparent. Communism is real to them, and God is not. They may profess God, but he is to them very remote at best, and his words strange, unfamiliar, and unknown. Men who walk in remoteness from God and his word are not likely to feel the strength of either, except in judgment. Men whose lives are too greatly absorbed by the power of evil will, in the end, be governed by that evil. William Wordsworth's poem, The Daffodils, makes a telling point too seldom appreciated in our time, on the power of memory and its influence upon us. Having spent time in the country beside a lake, and having witnessed the loveliness of a field of daffodils swaying in the breeze, Wordsworth concluded, "For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils." Wordsworth's romanticism led him to a faith in the cultivation of the ascetic experience as the key to life. For the Christian, it is the knowledge of God's law word and obedience unto it which is basic. A man who obeys God's law knows its force in his life, and he knows also the omnipotence of the lawgiver. He will move then, not in fear of the lawbreakers, but the lawgiver. He will be governed not by a faith in the power of lawbreakers, but a faith in the omnipotence of the lawgiver. It is precisely this faith in the lawgiver, the Creator God, which Obadiah teaches. The promise of judgment is a total one, verses 5 and 6. Edom was a wealthy country, highly productive in its farming. Good use was made of its rainfall. Irrigation was practiced in the dry season. Forest conservation, terracing, care for the soil, and other sound agricultural and conservationist practices were the rule. The Edomites, as well as other peoples of the area until the time of the Muslims, and especially the Turks, had a healthy respect for natural resources. They were far ahead of the modern champions of ecology. But this was not all. Copper and iron mines near Ezion Geber, as Litch points out, provided great wealth, as did trade and brokerage in world commerce. Edom was a wealthy nation and had accumulated great riches over the centuries. To this day, the echo of wealth survives in the name of the temple. Quote, "The most imposing Nabatean temple in Petra is called by the Arabs El Khazneh, the treasury," end quote. The totality of the judgment of God is underscored. If robbed by thieves, something would be left. A thief takes the choicest items, not everything. Grape pickers leave some gleanings, whether by intent or by inability to see all the fruit. Not so the judgment of God. Edom shall be stripped of everything. Quote, the ruin of Edom is too complete to be ascribed to human causality, to the depredation of robbers, to an overthrow as if reapers had come over the harvest. It is God's pitiless work. End quote. Edom is cleaned out completely. Quote, Obadiah mentions the plundering first because Petra, the capital of Edom, was a great emporium of the Syro-Arabian trade where many valuables were stored. And because with the loss of these riches the prosperity and power of Edom were destroyed. End quote. This destruction, moreover, came to Edom from the hands of her ostensible friends. Verse 7. Edom, by its control of the trade routes, combined with a strategic location which rendered it safe from easy attacks, was a nation courted by greater powers as well as by its neighbours. To conquer Edom was so difficult a project that it was normally wiser to make her an ally and partner. The destruction brought about by God reverses all these factors. Escaping Edomites seeking to cross their borders into safety in another country are turned back. No man wants a hunted Edomite in his land. The allies who do not participate in Edom's destruction and are at peace with her deceive her. They refuse to come to her defense as they had promised. In fact, they then join the enemy to prevail against Edom, to set a trap for her and to destroy her totally. According to Leitch, quote, they that eat thy bread, end quote, should be rendered, quote, thy bread have they laid as a festering wound under thee, end quote. The bread of Edom was its copper and iron industry. Its exports of copper and iron returned to her as instruments of war used in attacking and destroying Edom. In this crisis, the Edomites, normally very shrewd and intelligent, become stupid and contribute to their own ruin. Quote, there is none understanding in him, end quote, verse 7. Calvin observed, quote, that if nothing avails the ungodly when they set up their fortresses against the judgment of God, as though they could escape safe from his hand, for as God has heaven and earth under his control, he can, whenever it pleases him, draw down all who now despise his power and therefore deride his prophets, regard as nothing their threatenings. End quote. In the 6th and 5th centuries BC, the Edomites were completely driven out of their country. They took refuge in southern Judah. After the fall of Jerusalem in the Jewish-Roman War, the Edomites disappeared from history permanently. Ironically, their only safe refuge had been among the people whom they despised, the Jews. Their experience did not teach them any respect for the people of God, and the Herods were a family of Edomites or Idumeans who arose to plague Judah. Teman was a city of Edom, 5 miles from Petra, located where the modern Tawilan, Jordan, is found. It has an ancient reputation as a center of wisdom, possibly as an educational center, verses 8 and 9. Job's friend Eliphaz was from Teman, Job 2:11, and in the Apocrypha Baruch 3:23 associated Teman with seekers of understanding. The, quote, mighty men, end quote, of Teman are thus men of learning, understanding and skill in the arts and crafts, in education, diplomacy, and military strategy. The reference is to schooled men in all the disciplines necessary for Edom's survival and prosperity. Their wisdom, however, is turned into the stupidity of terror to the end that the Edomites are cut off and slaughtered. The possession of southern Judah, granted them by the Chaldeans as a reward, gave the Edomites a lease on life, but their final destruction could not be averted. When the Nabateans drove the Edomites out of their homeland, the survivors in Judea remained, together with some refugees, but these too finally disappeared. Pusey observed of the failure of Edomite wisdom that, quote, the men of the world think that they hold their wisdom and all God's natural gifts independently of the giver. God, by the events of his natural providence, as here by his word, shows, through some sudden withdrawal of their wisdom, that it is his, not theirs. Men wonder at the sudden failure, the flaw in the well-arranged plan, the one overconfident act which ruins the whole scheme, the overshrewdness which betrays itself, or the unaccountable oversight. They are amazed that one so shrewd should overlook this or that, and think not that he, in whose hands are our powers of thought, supplied not just that insight whereupon the whole depended. End quote. As Solomon observed earlier, quote, man's goings are of the Lord. How can a man then understand his own way? End quote. Proverbs 20:24. Men may chart the downfall of nations and their loss of common sense, but beyond a point, they cannot naturally account for it. Why should Assyria have survived so long and then declined so rapidly after attaining its greatest power? Certain factors were operative, we are told, but why not earlier, or why at all? Descriptions and analysis provide us with information, but not answers. Mindful of these things, Calvin wrote of verse 9, quote, the prophet, after having spoken of one kind of God's vengeance, adds another, that he would break whatever there was of strength in Idumea, and thus he shows that the courage and strength of men, no less than their understanding, are in the hand of God. As then God dissipates and destroys, whenever it pleases him, whatever wisdom there may be in men, so also he enervates and breaks down their hearts. In a word, he deprives them of all strength, so that they fail and come to nothing of themselves. Were they who are proud of their strength and counsel rightly to consider this, they would at length learn to submit themselves in true humility to God. But this truth is what the world cannot be made to believe. Yet God shows to us here, as in a picture, that however men may flourish for a time, they would immediately vanish, were not he to sustain them, and to support his gifts in them, and to keep them entire, and especially that empty smoke in everything that seems to be understanding and strength in men, for the Lord can easily take away both, whensoever it may please him. End quote. The Edoms of any and every age have no existence apart from God.